Double standards and vilification. This is for Black women in toxic jobs. You know, situations where you're asked to do things and you over exceed, and then you might need some support, and then you jump in and help other people, and everybody's coming to you to help out. But then when you might need a little help, there's nobody around. Or somebody might say to you at the job, we really want you to be open and transparent about issues going on at the job. And you do that, yet other people get uncomfortable with you doing that. Or you might experience the white tears. And then you feel like, wait a minute, what's going on here? It gets switched around to now you're the problem. If you had experiences at the job where you've experienced double standards and or vilification, this discussion is for you. If you don't know me already, I'm Dr. Kamani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist of over 20 years. I'm also a toxic job survivor, but more importantly, I'm a toxic job liberator for Black women. I'm also the co-founder with Marissa Price of the second annual Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black women, which is coming up soon, May 16th. So if you haven't already registered, please get your ticket. So today I'm excited to have Angeline here with us today. So Angeline, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am Angeline Smith. I'm a business strategy coach. My firm is A. Smith Strategies, and I work with Black women professionals to help them build online businesses, profitable online businesses, and break free from traditional employers who, let's say, they reward uh, things that are not necessarily in our favor when it comes
Right.
to
There were war
workplace.
shenanigans. There were war
Exactly.
shenanigans many times. And I think a lot of times what we've experienced as Black women is we have to work twice as hard to get half as much. Yet we
Mhm.
see other people around us who actually fail upwards or people who really are not qualified for their jobs. I think a lot of us have had that experience. So, Angeline, can you share about job experiences that you've had in which you've experienced double standards and or vilification in the workplace?
Oh wow, I'm gonna have to reach way back. I started my firm over 20 years ago
Mhm,
because of these experiences. The
mhm,
the first one that comes to mind is pretty much probably was the catalyst for me saying enough is enough, and it was when I was in a consulting firm and
mhm,
I was working on a project along with team members
mhm,
for a large school district.
mhm,
And I worked alone on the project, and there were coworkers, two coworkers who worked together on their portion of the project. And
mhm,
together, we came and we presented our work to the client, and our
mhm,
boss was there during the presentation.
mhm,
And my coworkers presented together, and then
mhm,
it was my turn. And
mhm.
afterwards, I was pretty proud of what I had done. And my boss said to the client, Angeline always has to show off and show that she's topping one. And I'm thinking, I did this on your behalf, and obviously that was a compliment, but you had to diminish what I
Well,
did.
that was degrading the way they said it, right?
Exactly.
Like kind of putting you in your place. Like, how dare you, this Black woman, trying to outshine everybody else? And the
Right.
boss is saying this to the client.
He's saying it to the client, and basically, and what I got from that was he was trying to make an excuse for my coworkers who may or may
Oh,
not have done it as
oh,
well.
okay, okay.
That's
So
what
don't
I
look
took
poorly
from it.
on them. She's just doing too much.
Exactly. So, he'd
Okay.
always, given me great compliments. So I didn't have any problem with him saying that I was doing something wrong, but it
Mhm,
was taking what I had done that I thought was a good job and
mhm.
sort of diminishing it to
Right.
make them look better for what, quite frankly, I thought was a poor job,
Uh-huh.
if I'm being honest. And that was just a slap in the face. And I'm thinking to
Yeah.
myself, I'm doing this, and I've always been of the opinion if I'm doing well, you're doing well. I'm working for you. And so the idea that that's not rewarded and it's used against me, that's it. I'm out of here. And that's after a long, a lot of experiences
Yeah. And
doing
I think
that.
that's the double standard part. I think that's what trips a lot of us up is that we think that, we're part of a team and it's if I do really well, this looks good for the
Yep.
organization.
No.
No, a lot of them don't do that. They think that way. They think that you are trying to outshine other people. And so their focus is less so on the organization and more so on how you make other people look and you make
Exactly.
other people look bad. So they're less focused on, wow, she's really helping us shine. It's, oh, she's making us look bad. So double standards, double
And
standards.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what makes us want to dim our light. But that didn't work for me. I was like, well, I can just do this for myself. So that was it. And at the time, I was working on my master's, and I literally pivoted my thesis for my master's and made it a business plan. So I
Hmm.
got real strategic, and I'm thinking, I love consulting, and I can take this and do my own thing with it,
Yeah.
and that's
So
what I
let's
did.
go back to you. I think you mentioned previously also there was a situation where there was a woman at the job and I think she wasn't doing too well or something, and you said
Yeah,
something. Can you share about that situation as
yeah.
well?
Now that was probably my first experience, if I'm thinking correctly, further back before this, and I had shared this earlier today on LinkedIn, coincidentally, where I had a supervisor who was, quite a bit my senior. I was in my 20s, young, eager, and she had made some very inappropriate comments by way of chastising me, saying that I had done something incorrectly. And it was, you just need to think, or something along those lines. And it was quite inappropriate. I at least
Oh
knew
wait,
that
she said
much.
she said what? You just have to what?
You need to learn how to think. That's what I remember her saying to me. And even at
Ooh,
that young
that's
age, I
demeaning.
remember thinking to myself, that's not appropriate. And so I
Yes.
went to the director of the department, and I asked for a meeting, and I explained what was going on, and I said, this is how she chose to address me. Um, and I was told, well, she's going through a lot right now.
What?
And at the time,
Never
her
mind, she demeans you.
no,
Let's
right,
give her a pass because she's
yeah,
going through a lot.
right. Let's forget about your grievance, and let's talk about this person's issue. Now I'm in here, I've scheduled an appointment. This is my time. But yet, let's give her a pass because she's going through something. And I'm thinking to myself, in my 20 years of being a first time college student and everything that I've had to do to get to this place right now, because
Mhm,
it was
mhm,
in an academic environment. I worked for the university that I had gone to school at,
mhm,
and
mhm.
it just didn't. And that was part of a training, as I said in that comment of, it wasn't until about 10 years later that I realized that was gaslighting. That was
Ah,
it taught me to say, okay, well, let me, think in deference of someone else. And I think
interesting.
that becomes ingrained in us in the workplace. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately,
So that
yeah,
experience happened. You try to tell somebody about it. They minimize it and say, give grace to this other person. And then the message sent to you was, I don't talk about these things when these things happen to me. I just kind of
right.
take it and just kind of expect that these things are going to keep happening.
Right, right. And
Mhm,
what you're saying isn't important. What your grievance is and what you're saying was done to you inappropriately, even though she's the supervisor and needs something, to be addressed.
mhm.
It's not important what you're coming into my office on your time to say to me. And
Wow.
and it's one of those things where in hindsight you go, I'll be damned. That
Yeah.
happened to me. Because in
Yeah.
the moment you may not have the maturity to realize that this
And
is
it's
happening.
gaslighting. It's gaslighting at its
Exactly.
finest. So you're sitting there
Yeah.
thinking, is this really happening? Like I
Yep.
shared this, and then you start thinking, did I say what I said correctly? Or did they not understand what I said? But it's not that. It's really they're trying to gaslight you that what you feel or your experience is really not as important as everybody else. And we think about it, Angeline, it really speaks to like that social hierarchy in the workplace,
Yep.
right? So the white supremacy in the workplace, so
Hmm.
we know coming in that people might perceive us in a certain way, but when these things happen, it's unsettling because you're
Hmm.
like, wait a minute, this just happened, didn't it? And you
Yep.
feel like crazy, like, am I making something? I'm not making it up, but the way that they act, like so dismissive of it. So can
Hmm.
you share with the audience when those two things happen that you just mentioned? I'm sure there's many, many, many other ones too. When
Hmm.
those things happen, how did it impact you in the moment from what you can remember?
the first one, well, the earlier one, when I was younger, it just angered me, and it hurt me, quite frankly, because I was so eager, and I was one that was very naive and to think that the rules applied, and that's what led me to let's follow the rules and go and file a grievance, and not in the official way, union talk, but air my grievances to the person who I thought would be appropriate to take care of it appropriately. And it was it was the first in a long line of training, if you will, to say these things aren't really true what they're telling you. We have these sets of rules, but obviously there's another set of rules we're playing by. And
Oh, can you
and
speak more
yeah.
on that? Can we speak more on that? So as we come into the workplace, we think we have to check all the boxes, be super attentive to all the rules and self-police ourselves and watch our tone and watch our emails. So
Mhm.
we're like heightened awareness, right? So because
Exactly.
we're trying to play
Super.
these rules. But
Yes.
can you please share about the other set of rules that many of us encounter?
Well, um, if the first thing that comes to mind in terms of the unwritten rules are, there's certain things that you um, need to temper what you would normally how you would normally say things, because we tend to at least be perceived as aggressive. And so it's not a written rule, but the rule is, you don't want to be perceived as this aggressive, offending Black woman. And so you need to be very careful. I've never been, well, I think I have been considered soft spoken, but I've never held my tongue. And I've been very straightforward because, again, in my brain, I'm an accountant by trade. In my brain, it's the facts. I don't sugarcoat anything, and it doesn't have to be that I'm being mean, but it's as if things have to be nuanced, and I'm just not a student of nuance, and that's I couldn't play the game, and I didn't understand that at the time until until I did understand it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about playing the game because as Black women, we all know that we have to play some level, some game when we're in the
Hmm.
workplace. And
Hmm.
sometimes, I talk to Black women, like my therapy clients, coaching clients, and we talk about playing the game. And even though we know it's a game, sometimes the game becomes exhausting. And sometimes because we know how to play it, but and or it starts to harm us.
Yep.
So what was happening with you as you were in these situations? You were like, oh, whoa, whoa, it's a whole different set of rules going on here.
Yeah.
So how did that impact you once you realized that?
Well, in answering that question, I'll give you another example. And again, this is just me, trying to do the right thing and be a
Mhm,
good employee. And
mhm,
my grandmother always told me, you don't get what you don't ask for. And so I was
mhm,
bold enough to ask that same supervisor, that partner of the a consulting firm, and this was before the final incident.
mhm,
I made an appointment with him. Again, make appointments. You don't just barge in. You
right.
follow the rules, right?
Mhm.
And so when I had time with him, I went in with stating my case for a promotion,
Hmm.
and the look on his face was pure disgust, like how dare you? And I'm thinking
Oh,
to myself, well, how would I know that you'll give it to me if I don't ask? You actually are offended that I'm
and again, the
asking?
different rules because other
Right,
people are told to assert themselves and ask for what you
exactly,
want.
exactly. And so
Mm,
this is how I had my subtle training is okay, that wasn't appropriate.
mm,
However, I don't wait to be tapped on the shoulder. It's
mhm,
your turn. No,
mhm,
I think I've done what I have understood that I'm supposed to do to excel in this role. I know I have a job evaluation coming up, and so I need to set this on the table. And so, after he saw my reaction to his reaction, I think he sort of regrouped and he said, "Well, we can discuss it during your evaluation." And I said, "Okay." So I was ready. And during the evaluation, he came with, there are certain things that you have not performed to the level that you need to get to that position you were asking for. And so, pen in hand, what are they? Because now, again, I'm into metrics. Let's figure out what they are.
And again, you're taking him at face value, and so you're
Exactly.
trying to logically address the problem.
Exactly. Not thinking I'm being dismissed. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, well, now this is another hoop.
Right. Tell
This
me
is
what
the
they
hoop.
are, I'll take note and I'll exceed those things.
Yeah, and
Yes,
this is
tell
the hoop.
me.
So tell me how to get through that hoop.
Mhm.
And so he said he gave me some things, and so I said okay. And throughout that year, I had made a note of things that he wanted me to do, be more communicative with the client in terms of keeping the client abreast of the project that I'm leading, and I made note of those instances where I was giving project progress reports to the client on the consulting projects and other things. So when it was time for the next evaluation, it was, we don't have the money. And so, now this is long time in preparation. This is what I'm doing to get what I'm told I should get. And so when he said he didn't have the money, okay. But I think it was probably about 2 months later, he hired someone in and he created a position for that was a white male that
Wow.
I was uh, among other employees, because I'm not suggesting that I was this person, but there were some times when I had to sort of help him get acclimated to his role. And
Now that
so
was a
that was
slap in the
another
face.
lesson. Yeah.
That was a slap in the face. So first, the utter disgust, like how dare you, black woman,
Yep.
trying to ask me for a promotion. He couldn't even hold it in. He couldn't even disguise it. It was written all over his face. And then he recognized, uh-oh, she can see how I'm looking, so let me fix my face.
Yeah.
And you're taking notes. Okay, got it. Let me logically write down, let me exceed these expectations. Let me do it. Now all of a sudden I don't have the money. But then later I magically can create a position and I hired somebody who actually you needed to help support in other ways.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so classic. That's so
Yeah.
classic.
Yeah.
So, Angeline, I think that what you're saying is so important too, because I think a lot of Black women, what I've encountered, what Black women I know, and what we do is that we try to make logical sense out of things. So
Yep.
something we might be like, "What? Okay, well, let me try to take notes, or let me try to get some more experience, or let me try to get another degree, or let me try to get another credentials. Oh, let me try to meet with other people. Let me try to get clarity." We try to do all these different things, but the thing is this that we don't understand in the moment is that it's not going to make logical sense. So we
Mm-mm.
might think, "Okay, I know how to play this. Okay, I'll just exceed," but it still doesn't work.
Nope.
So what I've encountered, my own experiences in Black women I've worked with, is that we have heard or experienced some version of these things. One, um, we're too aggressive. Two, we're difficult to work with. Three, we are intimidating. Okay. Can you share, have you had any of those experiences in the workplace where you got that message?
Yeah. Um, the too aggressive thing. I can remember I worked for a different consulting firm that where there was full-time travel. So I'm already out of my element because I'm a girl from Detroit, and so now I'm traveling in Portland, Oregon, with my coworkers, and I'm having to listen to the music and go to the bars and the beer and all of this. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm already being integrated into your world, and so
Right.
I'm already feeling like an outsider. And
Mhm.
there was an incident on the client site where there was something that, and I can't remember all the details, but what I remember of it was that my bringing it to the client's attention about what was happening and how we couldn't rectify it as the consulting firm and that it needed to be taken care of by the client because this meant addressing their employees and that wasn't our role. Um, it was met with, you know, who are you to tell us how to teach our employees of certain things. And I'm thinking, well, how can we do our job if the employees aren't doing what, I'm there to document processes for technical people in order to customize the system for the employee's functional use. So if I document a process that I have to give to the technical people, the employees need to follow that process. And if they don't, then our work isn't being effective, and I can't make them. So this is where I need you to intervene. But in asking for that, I was the aggressor. Um,
Again, the
and
how dare you, the how dare you
yeah,
message. Yeah, yeah. So, Angeline, you talked about a series of events that happened. What got you to the point where you said, I'm done with these jobs. I need to pivot out of here. How did you get to that point where you were like, I need to get out of here. I need to pivot to something different?
I think what did it for me was the understanding and realization that it was possible to do my own thing. So there was an alternative presented to me, and that was done by way of seeing another Black woman come into a consulting firm as a contractor, but being her own boss in her own firm. And I thought, so she's doing what I do, and I like what I do, and she's doing it on her own terms. So it opened a door for me, and she became the catalyst for me saying, "Okay, this is doable." And I saw the treatment that she received as an independent contractor versus an employee, and I thought to myself, they don't own her,
Oh, I
and
like that. They
so
don't own
and,
her.
and I
In
really
exchange of, I provide this labor and you provide me with the money
exactly,
and you don't
and
have
that's
power
it.
over me.
Exactly. I
Mm.
own my own schedule. I own my time. If you
Mhm.
ask me for something and I say I'm going to commit to it, we agree on the terms of that and I can follow those terms. So it's getting back into this is what you're going to do and this is what you
Yes,
did. And
yes,
so I
and without the mind games.
exactly just
Aha.
eliminate all of that. And so seeing her and really appreciating that it's possible. I
Okay.
never had lack of confidence in what I could do. It was just
Mhm.
playing in that field wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily benefiting me because there was
Mhm.
too many games to play to get
Right.
even to get the work done. It may not have even been to get a promotion. It was just to be successful at doing your job. You got to go
Yeah.
through some drama,
So
and
much drama.
yeah,
All the time. It's just
yeah,
ongoing. So
yeah,
when you saw this other Black woman, you're like, whoa, I never thought about that. So she kind of exposed a new way of working to you.
exactly,
Okay, okay.
exactly.
And so when you saw that, what other things helped you to pivot out of that job? How did you
Um,
prepare to pivot?
Well, yeah, it was the perfect opportunity because again, I was in the middle of my master's degree, and I had
Mhm,
already had my undergrad degree, and I had the consulting experience, and
mhm.
I had the opportunity to choose my master's thesis, and so in working towards that thesis, I could literally do the research on what it would take. So I basically did the business plan, what are my
Ah,
clients,
perfect.
and
That
I
was
got the grade
brilliant.
for it, and I,
That was
I followed
brilliant.
that plan. Yeah,
Yes. So
yeah,
it was
and
a twofer. You did your thesis and also did your business plan about how to exit out and go into consulting same time.
yeah, I gave myself I had a 5-year plan,
Okay.
and it turned out that I started working with nonprofits initially, and I had gone to my partner, the boss, the partner of that same firm, and I
Mhm.
said, "Hey, why don't we have nonprofit clients?" And this was a pretty prestigious firm, and he was rightfully so said, "We don't have the overhead for that. They can't pay us. How are they going to pay your salary?" And I thought to myself, well, I don't have that kind of overhead. Maybe that's who I'll go after. I'm not
Ah,
moonlighting. I'm
okay.
still following the rules, right?
Okay.
And so I
Okay.
can remember being in the one of the top floors of the building and meeting clients down at the Starbucks on my lunch break while I was still working and working my plan to get out of there.
Okay.
And what happened is after 2 years, I was able to quit the job and start because when I gave myself that 5-year plan in my
Mhm,
mind, and we do this a lot, I
mhm.
need another credential. So part of that 5-year plan was to get the PhD. 'Cause I
Oh,
thought to
wow.
myself, there's no way somebody's going to hire me as a consultant. This
If
is
you
our
have the
mindset.
PhD,
We have
right.
to educate ourselves into
And
being
you
ready.
got other people out here who barely got anything,
Yep,
consultants. Look at the government going on right now. You see people who are unqualified running stuff. Okay,
yep,
but I digress. But anyway, so
yep.
you start replacing your income, you got clients, you start getting your business rolling. So you were able to pivot out that job 3 years before you really
Oh,
anticipated leaving.
2 years. And,
2 years.
so what I
Okay.
had to do, I was at a crossroads where I said, okay, is the PhD a means to the end that you want, or is this for some
Mm,
prestige where
good
somebody has to
question.
call you something?
Good
And it was like,
question.
I'm going to drop out of this program. I don't need it. And
Mm,
that was my decision to pivot. I don't
yeah,
need this like I thought
yeah,
I did because I'm managing to build the client base and go off on my own. And
yeah.
that's what I did.
That's a good inquiry. I think that before we start thinking about getting more credentials or degrees, to think, do I really need this? Do I really want this? And if I'm able to do what I want to do without doing these things, why am I doing this?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I've seen that a lot in us. I think what
Yes.
we do is we use the education and compensate for what we think are the shortcomings, and we really
Yeah.
don't have those shortcomings. It's a
Yeah.
matter of addressing fears, it's a matter of dealing with confidence. And
Yes.
so I know with working with women, that has to be addressed as well. I can't just say, come here, tell me what your skill is, and let's start a business. We need to work with
Right.
the head as well, which you
Right.
actually
Right.
absolutely know.
Right.
Uh,
And I definitely do not want to discourage anybody from getting degrees and credentials,
right,
getting a PhD. I don't want
not
to,
at all.
because I got a PhD. But what I do want to say is I want to highlight what you said. If it is not going to benefit you, or that's not something that you really want, really reevaluate that. And I want to just be very honest with you that the higher you go up, many times you are the target of even more venom. Okay. So
Mhm.
you might think, oh, I got this PhD, I got this, and they can't touch me. No, they are really going to come for you because now you're shattering all those stereotypes they have about Black women. And it's
Right.
like, how dare you? And so they do these different things to put you in your place. So, Angeline, were there any fears in you pivoting out that job? Because you talked about fears earlier. Were there any fears, and how did you address those fears, if you had the fears?
I just, there are fears to this day. I've been self-employed full time for it was 20 years exactly in 2024.
Wow.
And there's not a day that goes by that I don't experience fear, but
Okay.
that's that comes with the territory.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop what
Okay.
your goals are and what you're trying to do.
Right.
And
Right.
so
How
I
did the
just
fear
jumped.
look different as you were pivoting out? Because I think a lot of Black women stay in jobs that are not serving them for whatever reason. Might be toxic, maybe they've outgrown it, but they stay many times, and I stay too, because of the fears of the unknown, the fears of how am I going to replace my income? I got bills to pay. So
Mhm.
how does that fear, those earlier fears, look different than the fears you have now?
The earlier fears were exactly what you said. How am I going to sustain myself? How am I going to
Mhm.
take care of myself?
Mhm.
And what I had to realize, especially after having experienced all of those things, is that's not necessarily a guarantee either.
That's
So
true.
you could go in there tomorrow thinking I'm not going to start this business and go to my good job with my good benefits and
Mhm.
be handed the door.
Absolutely.
And so it's just a matter of perception in my
Yeah.
mind. When
Yeah.
I would start to go through my mind and say, okay, what's the worst case scenario and what's
Mhm.
my plan to deal with it? Again, I'm
Mhm.
strategic. And so I'm thinking,
Mhm.
okay, what do I do if this
Mhm.
happens? And once I can at least embrace the concept of the worst case scenario where, okay, I'm not going to be dead and on the streets,
Mhm.
then that means I can work towards getting myself to the point where that's probably likely not going to happen, but I can
Right.
deal with it if it does. And now let me focus on getting to where I want to be. And
Right.
that's how I
So
work
so
through it.
identify what the fears are and
Mhm.
then come up with a plan for how to address those fears,
Yep.
right? So those worst case scenarios, talk about what your plan is and also your track record. If you have been able to address things in the past, what makes you think that currently or in the future you're not able to address, right? So
Right.
what does the fears look like now, Angeline?
Now, it is really interesting because when I left 20 years ago, I started a consulting slash accounting firm. And
Mm.
so for me, um, I've just recently pivoted to specifically coaching and leaving the accounting along, relying on that background, that financial background to sort of put
Mhm.
the checks and balances into what someone's doing. so that it's not just try this, but
That's
putting
good.
the numbers to it and seeing what's
So
feasible as a
important.
business, right?
Hmm.
And so for me, I had to do a hard pivot of now I got to get into learning digital marketing. I have to get into a lot of things that because I wanted to increase my capacity. And if I'm doing done for you work where I'm
Hmm.
doing the accounting, I only
Hmm.
have so many hours to do it. So how
Hmm.
can I start to earn that passive income and start to pivot into done with you work
Okay.
to expand my capacity for earning?
Hmm.
And so in doing that, I thought about the going back to school thing, and I thought there's YouTube University. There are people who are coaches who can teach me these things. And so it
Right.
was, I'll be 57 this year, but I always have believed in staying abreast of what's going on in my industry in technology. That was part of the reason I was able to do what I did in accounting is because I came into the industry just when QuickBooks was introduced. And so
Mm-hmm.
the old school accountants didn't want to embrace that technology because what it meant is they had to share the work that they was doing with the client because
Ah.
that opened up the door for small businesses to take some control over their books. And I said, well,
Mhm.
if I learn this, that's how I can start getting clients because
Okay.
I can use that. And so, in that, with that same mindset, I just started to see what the technology was, learning funnels and learning all of these things that would get me to where I needed to be, and took the time to pivot. And that meant losing some income because in order to make way for the new client base, I had to sort of stop taking on and eliminate some of the older. So again, it's strategy, and that's why I make the distinction between business coach and business strategy coach. I'm a business strategy coach.
What's the
I
difference?
I focus on the strategic part of approaching the business. In other
Hmm.
words, what are the goals of the business? And what are the steps and the metrics that you can measure you're getting towards those goals instead of most times you're looking at business coaches as, setting up something and the hands-on work of the business where it's a
Hmm.
lot of the brain work, if you will, of saying, okay, don't just wait and look at your numbers and see if you hit the target. Let's
Hmm.
go along the way as you're working towards the target and see how you're on track for that. And
Okay.
that's all about the strategy of it.
Okay. Okay. So it's interesting. You're talking about a number of pivots you made in your life. So you pivoted from that job
Hmm.
and working for other people to pivoting to your own business to
Hmm.
also pivoting and your own business evolving
Hmm.
over time too. And it just reminds me of I'm listening to this audiobook by Pinky Cole, and she talks about in life to succeed, you have to constantly pivot. Your business has to constantly pivot. You have to look at like what are the trends going on. You have to look at your clientele. You have to constantly pivot. So being able to pivot is so important. And being stagnant and you're not going to succeed because things have passed you by and you're still trying to stay to what has been. Okay.
Hmm.
So, Angeline,
Absolutely.
yes, can you share with us how different does your life look now as opposed to when you worked for these other people? How different does your life look now?
In addition to eliminating the drama, that was my initial, like, let me just get away from this and do my work. It gave me the freedom of my time to own my own calendar and not
Mm-hmm.
just be in such a. I can remember being in a job and seeing the rat race, seeing that I got to go do this, I got to go do that, and everything was centered around the job as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to having that freedom to say, okay, I can do the work and I can integrate the work into my life as opposed to trying to build a life outside of the work.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's what it looked like is to
Okay.
be able to say, I've never been a morning person. And so I need to
And
figure
don't
out when, right. And so I need to make sure I build that, my effectiveness around that.
mm-hmm.
And so that's what it looks like for me.
Okay. And you've been on your own business for 20 years?
Yes.
That's amazing.
I have not
Okay.
worked as an employee for anybody in 20 years, and I've been
Wow.
able to. And again, it really does boil down to strategic thinking. The first thing that I did when I started going after my nonprofit clients, and I thought to myself, because boss at the time had a point, they're not, how can they pay you? You command a salary. And so I thought to myself, where are they getting their money from? And
Mm.
so I started looking at what you call grant intermediaries, these institutions that would be the flow through from federal grants to doling out the grants to the nonprofits. And
Hmm.
so in my research, I found that these intermediaries would have vetted consulting lists. So when they gave the grants to the nonprofits, they said, these are the vetted consultants that you must choose from to spend your
Oh,
money on.
wow.
Guess who got on those consultant
You
lists?
did.
So,
Okay.
again, that's what I mean by the strategic part of it is, okay,
Yes.
you have to think outside of the box. And in addition to that, looking at what legislation is coming down the pipe. The reason that that
Mm.
was able to happen is that was during the Bush era of where they were looking at the religious institutions getting grants and whatnot. I forget what you call
Mm.
it, but and so a lot of grants were being handed out to nonprofits, and I worked specifically with community-based organizations that got the community development block grants because
Mhm.
those were my people, and that's
Okay.
who I want. And I started helping them with strategic plans and also using the accounting background to help them get the grants because they could
Mm.
use my resume to say, now we have somebody on our team that can manage the grants and we can show we're good stewards of the grants. And so that's
Mm.
another strategy. Okay, I can help you get the grants if you use my credentials to tell the funders you can manage the money because that's what they're going to be
Perfect.
looking for.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect. So you found your niche in that.
yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So, Angeline, can you share with the audience what are all the services that you offer?
So right now, what I offer is strategic business planning coaching. And so I have a 90-day program where people go into a strategic business planning one-on-one, what I call an intensive with me. And
Hmm.
at the same time, they're also working in what I have created as the Center for Entrepreneurial Success.
Hmm.
And in that center,
Hmm.
instead of the model of group coaching, I'm using my tools that I have, and it's more like a training center. So
Hmm.
that there's no way you can work with me within 90 days because usually that's just to build your plan. But
Hmm.
then you actually have to go and implement that plan. And that may take learning financial management, that may take learning tools like QuickBooks. And so in the Center for Entrepreneurial Success,
Hmm.
you can get into that center within those 90 days as part of your 90 days. But then
Okay.
you have the option of continuing in the center indefinitely for a small subscription, where you're looking at anytime I put on workshops, bring people in. So as you're working your plan that we've
Hmm.
developed, you have access to me again to book one-on-one sessions, but you also have access to a broader community of what I call strategists that are in there building their plan and taking advantage of what I would be offering within the center. So it's sort of
Okay.
a twofold. And there's no, the entry into the center is through the intensive. So everybody's on the same page that they're working on their plan.
Okay. And
Yeah.
who are these services for?
These services are for Black women professionals. And so we're talking attorneys, we're talking people who, and that literally could be anybody, quite frankly. I have
Hmm.
not encountered somebody that was a good fit that said, okay, this is my skill set. So I say, you're the subject matter expert. I don't necessarily have to know your skill set. I need to help you understand how to build your business around it. So I'm looking at people who are HR professionals, for example. Let's
Hmm.
look at these women who are now no longer in these DEI roles that can
Hmm.
go and take those skills and work for themselves and
Hmm.
find clients who are still inclined to implement some of those programs, just as an
Hmm.
example. Um,
Right.
and I give the example of how, because people think, well, who are going to be my clients? Well,
Mhm.
we are very educated as Black women, as you
Yes,
know. And so
sir.
we are our clients, and I give
Mhm.
the example, if you're an attorney and you're starting your firm and what you do is help Black businesses create their contracts for their businesses, you hire a woman who is a Black woman who owns an IT firm who can come in and put your security in place in your law firm and
Mm.
so on and so forth. And so we
Mhm.
have to build that network. And that's what that Center for Entrepreneurial Success will provide as well, is that
Mhm.
that synergy, if you will, of people
Okay.
who are
So to
working on their
share about
business.
resources, and so Black women can work with each other and support one another in
Exactly.
their businesses.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good, very good. So, Angeline, if there's a Black woman watching now, she might be live or she might be watching a replay, and she can relate to some things that we talked about. Maybe she's feeling there's double standards at her job. Maybe she's feeling vilified. Maybe she just feels like this is just not the place for me, but she's
Hmm.
scared to leave. She's scared to leave because of the things we talked about earlier. We talked about, scared about, got bills to pay. What am I going to do? She's scared. So, what
Hmm.
words of wisdom can you offer to her about pivoting?
Well, first, I want to acknowledge that those are real fears, and
Yeah.
that, and I'm not one to say, "Psh, start your own business. It's easy." I definitely don't want to give that impression to anybody because I understand those fears. But
Yeah.
what I would say to someone is, it doesn't necessarily have to be that this is what you're going to do right away, but you have to
Mhm.
be prepared. And
Mhm.
so, in being prepared, at least you can look at how you can monetize your skills so that
Mhm.
this is your plan B, perhaps. It may
Right.
not be this is your exit strategy, but it
Mhm.
might end up being your exit strategy if that's all you have, if that job
Yes.
goes away. And
Yes.
so, I would say, if nothing else, don't look at it from the perspective of, I'm going to leave this security to go to something that's insecure or unsecure. Look
Mm.
at it as, I'm already in an unsecure environment. There
Oh,
is
that's
not a
true.
guarantee,
That's
especially in
true.
this climate.
So
Okay.
true.
And
So true.
so, why not start thinking about, you've educated yourself either formally or informally, and you
Mhm.
have some skills. You're not in that job for no reason.
Oh, yeah. They
You're
wouldn't have hired you if
benefiting
you had
from something
skills.
that you know or that you can do.
Yes.
So you start thinking about how you can benefit from those things that you know and that you can do
Mhm.
now. And
Yes.
so it doesn't have to be this outright effort to say, I'm going to go and start my business and the hell with these people, because that's really what I would like for us to do. That's
Right.
where
We
I
want
am
to
right
say it.
now.
We thinking it
So,
in our head. We thinking it almost
yeah,
every day. But what
yeah,
we're saying is be very strategic and
yeah,
and create an exit plan, and how it is so important, especially right now during this time. As Black people, as Black women, we absolutely need to have our plans in place. Plan A, B, C, and D. Need to have plans
absolutely.
ready. And so even if you're still at the job, you're like, I'm not quite sure, there's no harm to you of starting to plan and starting to get ready. Because like you said, Angeline, you can come into a job one day and it's gone. Like
Right,
woof. Like we've seen
right,
all these federal workers laid off, and those are supposed to be the stable jobs, the good
right.
jobs, and they're just gone. And so again, as Black women, it's so important for us to be strategic and
Hmm.
recognizing that we need to constantly pivot. We know how to pivot as Black women, but
Hmm.
sometimes the pivot might mean I need to pause and really evaluate: is this situation really serving me? And if it's not, how do I start getting my plans together so I can exit and pivot out and do well
Right,
and do well?
right,
Yes,
right.
absolutely. So
Right.
again,
And I would
everyone,
also say, if I could
uh-huh,
also say,
uh-huh,
sometimes the fear will be diminished if you know your number. You don't have to go and get everybody as your client.
that's
What's
true.
that number that you need to sustain yourself?
Yes,
And when you start to do the numbers, which is what I help with, is let's crunch
yes,
the numbers. Let's see what your pricing can be. Let's see, based
yes,
on that pricing, how many clients can you take in, and
yes,
based on how many clients you can take in, what does that look like? More times than not, it's going to look like more than what you're already getting as a
exactly.
stagnant
It's
salary.
like the boogeyman is in our head. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. But once you actually look at the numbers and
Yep.
you approach what you've been avoiding, then it feels more doable, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
having that financial number, and I just want to say that's exactly what happened to me when I was at the toxic job. Because when I took a leave of absence and I started exit planning, I started working with a Black woman financial psychologist. And one of the first things she asked me was, what is your exit number? Like, what number do you need to be bringing in every month to leave this job? And I didn't know, Angeline. I didn't know.
Hmm.
I'm just
Hmm.
working paid, like, oh God, when my bills are paid,
Yep.
whatever, whatever. But I wasn't looking at the numbers. And
Hmm.
so she was like, hold on, let's look at the numbers and then
Hmm.
let's come up a plan based upon the numbers. That was so empowering because then I
Yeah.
felt like, okay, now I know what I'm working towards. And now
Hmm.
I know what the plan is. And now I can say, wait a minute, I got the numbers, I got the money, so I can pivot out of here. So I think once
Hmm.
we have that financial exit plan, that can
Mhm.
help us out tremendously. And Dr.
Right.
Roche Brown, that is the Black woman financial psychologist whom I work with, she is one
Mhm.
of the speakers at the Job Liberation Virtual Summit.
Oh, good.
So again, everyone, the Job Liberation Virtual Summit, May 16th through the 18th. We have bonus sessions 3 days after that in the evening. So the Liberation Summit really provides Black women from I can't stand this job and I want to get out of here, or maybe you've been laid off, or maybe you've retired. But it really helps Black women to figure out what our next moves are professionally. So, what to do about replacing our income, how to create multiple streams of income, what to do about our insurance, what to do about our retirement, all those things you're learning from other Black women. As a
Mhm.
privacy consideration, none of the attendees will be seen on camera, okay? Because we don't want people in our business, okay? So your name won't be listed, you won't be seen on camera. Only the summit participants, only the summit speakers, excuse me, only the summit speakers will be seen on camera. Also, it is recorded. So if you can't come all the days, that's fine. It's recorded. So get your ticket. Again, it starts May 16th. So we're talking about all these things to help you, okay? Then we're going to have bonus sessions if you get the top tier ticket. The bonus sessions deal with the financial part, right? So the financial masterclass part. The other, we're going to have Janice Sutherland talking to Black women 50 and above, because what I've encountered is once you get to a certain age, particularly 50, you start thinking, I can't leave this job, I can't leave, I can't leave. But what if you get laid off? Or what if you really can't stand that job? What are your options? Talking about that. And then Jackie Abram is going to be talking about that third bonus session. So, what happens where you're trying to prepare to leave the job, but you need some support? You need to figure out, how am I going to cope being here day to day while I create my exit plan? So, again, the financial, the 50 and above, the how am I going to handle it was all covered in the second annual Job Liberation Virtual Summit. Information is on the screen about how to register. It's also in the description section. I want to say to Angeline, thank you so much for being my guest today. And I
My
also want to say
pleasure.
to everybody, please give this video a thumbs up. Please share this video with at least 2 other Black women, and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. It is free. It is completely free. So everyone, I will see you guys. I'll be on Stephanie Perry's channel in the morning. So
Oh,
check me
good.
out with Stephanie talking about liberation, job liberation. So everyone, I will see you later. And Angeline, if you could just stay on, okay? Okay, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.